Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad. Can you hear me? I'm driving, so you're on speakerphone, but hopefully this will work.
Oh, I can
You
hear you
can hear me
fine.
okay, right?
Yes, I can hear you
Okay,
fine.
good. All
Uh,
right, so tell me, why don't you start? Tell me what you're doing, what your project is. Or tell me about yourself. You're a senior in high school or junior?
okay. About myself, I'm a senior high school at Mount St. Joseph High School in Baltimore, Maryland. For my senior project, I'm interviewing doctors and physicians on how COVID-19 has impacted them this year and last year, and their their journey through med school, and what brought them to their dream career today. That's what I'm interviewing them about.
I see. Okay, and are you interested in a career in healthcare?
Yes, I am.
I see. Okay, and so you got a list of names through various contacts, including Mrs. Hobrock, I take it. Or sorry, Mrs. That's not her name anymore. Mrs. Campbell.
Right. Yes.
Sorry, I called her Mrs. Hobrock. That's how I know her.
Oh, okay.
We went to high school together.
Gotcha.
Anyway, okay. Well, that sounds like a cool project. What else? So let me, before I hijack your interview, let me just tell you a little bit about myself. It sounds like you probably interviewed a few other healthcare professionals. Is that right?
Yes, I have.
Okay. What fields have they been in? What
Um,
profession?
some have been physicians. I mean, not physicians. Plastic surgeons. Psychological majors with studying muscular thing. A lot of surgeons. Doctors, just pediatricians that work in the office.
Okay.
Yeah, all around.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So, do you want to just start asking me? You know, you may. I was about to start telling you what I do for a living, but you may be. You're probably going to ask me a lot of these questions. So should I just let you start asking questions?
Yes, I'll start asking questions. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Um, First question: where did you attend college and medical school?
I went to college at Cornell, and I went to medical school at Cornell.
What was your major in college, and what degree did you earn?
I majored in chemistry, and I had a bachelor's of science.
Did you always know what your dream career would be, or did it change over time?
It changed over time. When I went to college, I actually started out as an engineering major, and I was not pre-med. And then I switched over to from chemical engineering to chemistry to pre-med. I think when I was a sophomore.
Got you. So, could you give me a rundown of what your daily life is now as a physician, either at work or whatever you do during your day?
Sure. Yeah. So I am an interventional radiologist. So what I do is a mix of what we call minimally invasive procedures or surgeries and diagnostic radiology, which involves looking at scans, imaging of the body, different parts of the body. So I spend about half my day in front of a computer where I look at scans, and I spend about half my day doing these minimally invasive surgeries.
Okay.
Um, so those, when I say surgeries, we usually call them minimally invasive procedures, but essentially we're not cutting people open. We're using small catheters and wires and making small holes in different parts of the body to avoid surgery when possible. So, for instance, if someone has an abscess, like a collection of pus inside their belly, so that they don't have to go to get an open operation where they have a big incision down the middle of their abdomen, we can use CAT scan or ultrasound to see the area and then put a needle into it and then put a drainage tube into it without ever making an incision in the abdomen. So that's just one example. Other things would be something like today I put in something called an IVC filter,
Okay.
and that is a basket that catches clots in the inferior vena cava
Mm-hmm.
X-rays, sounds.
Got you. Got you. What motivated you to pursue this career?
So when I was in medical school, I was kind of deciding between a few different fields. I think the fields I was most interested in were emergency medicine, and I decided that emergency medicine was not for me because I thought that the overnight lifestyle, changing hours constantly, and potential for burnout was high, and I didn't see myself doing that long term. So I
Mm-hmm.
decided not to do ER, and I thought about doing general surgery. And when I rotated through general surgery when I was a medical student, I decided I didn't like waking up at 4 a.m. every morning.
Yeah.
And that was enough to deter me from going into general surgery. And then I liked radiology because I liked anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of drew me to radiology. And then when I was in radiology residency, which is 5 years after medical school, when I was in radiology residency, I kind of missed the direct patient contact, and I like doing things with my hands. And I thought the procedural part, the surgical part of radiology was appealing. And so I decided to self-specialize after I did radiology. I decided to do interventional radiology, which is another year of training. So I went down that pathway.
How did you manage your time efficiently between school and your social life, either during college or med school?
Between school and social life. So I think that when I went to college, I had a challenging time in college more so than medical school doing that, because in college I was going from you go to a pretty high powered high school, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong, but compared to where I went to high school, I went to high school in have you ever been to Cumberland, Maryland?
You said Cumberland, Maryland? I
Yeah.
think a couple times for like sporting
So
events.
it's rural, and it's not. It's the schools there aren't particularly super rigorous. So when I went to college, I think that I wasn't used to the workload because I never studied like that. I've never been. I never experienced those kinds of demands. So
Right.
college was difficult at the beginning. It took probably a year or two before I kind of got in the swing of things, and then it got better. But balancing social life versus school. At the beginning, probably, I think I was doing a little too much socializing, not enough school. And then kind of got that down after a little while. But I think by the time I got to medical school, the transition wasn't nearly as difficult for me. So the medical school I went to, Cornell Med School, is in New York City, whereas Cornell undergrad is in upstate New York.
Okay.
And so I left Ithaca, which is a small town where I was an undergrad, and I went to New York City. And in New York City, I'd say the biggest challenge was, I guess, in that balance is that there are a lot more distractions in New York City than in a small town. And that was the first time I ever lived in a large city. Since I grew up in a small town, I went to college in another small town. So in New York
Mm-hmm.
City, there are a lot of distractions, but I think being surrounded by extremely motivated peers, which you're probably surrounded by right now, but that's who surrounded me when I was in medical school. I had a class of 100 medical students, and everybody was extremely, extremely motivated. So, if anything, I felt like I was spending more time than I should sometimes on academics. But I think all in all, I don't really have any regrets. Everything worked out well.
That's good. That's good. What is the most rewarding part about being a physician?
I'd say the most rewarding part, there's a couple of rewarding aspects of what I do specifically. So one is obviously when you can do something that dramatically helps a patient.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's extremely rewarding from a personal standpoint. The second thing I would say from a less personal human
Right.
You get to know them. So I typically don't know my patients when I see them. They're already in bad shape. And for instance, if someone is in a car accident and they have intra-abdominal bleeding or bleeding from their spleen or their liver or their kidney, usually they have two options: either going to surgery, where the trauma surgeon, will potentially take out their spleen, for instance, or they can come to us and we do what's called an embolization, where we put a catheter through the blood vessels, kind of like a plumber,
Uh huh.
and inject dye into the blood vessels, find the blood vessel that's bleeding, and then we put little coils in there to block it off so the bleeding stops.
Okay.
So I find cases like that, pretty rewarding. I mean, those are often young, healthy people that we can really help out. They have, their whole lives ahead of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also technically challenging. So when you are successful, I find that part rewarding too.
What was your most challenging part about your studies in either college or medical school?
The most challenging part of my studies. So I would say in college, do you mean like specific subject areas?
Yes.
Okay. So in college, I would say that the engineering part of my undergraduate education was the most challenging. Engineering is it's a whole different level of math than what you study when you are pre-med. So when I switched from engineering to pre-med, all of a sudden I thought, wow, this math is really easy. Whereas engineering math, part of it's also who you're being compared with. Your peers in engineering are usually math-oriented people, where in pre-med classes, not so much. So I would say engineering math, specifically engineering calculus in college, and probably in medical school. That's a good question. In medical school, I would say neuroanatomy was the hardest thing I did in medical school.
Okay. What did you participate in any clubs or activities in college?
Yes. So in college, let's see. So in college, a couple things. One I did was intramural basketball. Then one activity I did was a intramural skiing. And then I participated in a cultural organization, a South Asian cultural organization. And as far as other non-academic activities, I tutored high school students when I was in college in physics and chemistry and math. And I think those are the main things I did in college. And then I continued in medical school I kind of tutored high school students through college and medical school in those areas, science and math mostly.
Could you give me like a rundown of how like you got to where you are today through like the medical school process and the like classes you took?
Yeah, yeah. So I would say we kind of touched on some of this already, but so like I said, I started down the engineering pathway, then changed, and so I switched over to I was a chemistry major after that. Then I think in college, when I switched to being pre-med, I realized all of a sudden that my GPA is everything. GPA was everything, and until you take your MCATs. So I became a lot more focused at that point, and my grades, like I said, I told you I had a little bit of an adjustment period when I was in college at the beginning. I wasn't used to the rigors of a major university. But when I was a sophomore, I kind of buckled down. I moved into an apartment with a couple other guys, and you're gonna laugh at this, but we got rid of our TV. And back then there were no iPads. So we didn't have any smartphones, we didn't have iPads, and we had no TV in our apartment when I was a sophomore in college. And miraculously, somehow my grades improved dramatically. So then I started doing GPA wise, and then MCATs. I mean, MCATs back then were everything to get into medical school. So I took the MCATs kind of earlier than planned and studied my butt off for a summer. I did well in the MCATs, and then I applied to a whole lot of med schools, and I got rejected from a whole lot of med schools. That was the way. That was the way it went. You had to apply. I think I applied to about 25 med schools,
Oh
and
wow.
I think I got into maybe like 6 of the 25, and then I got into med school. And then in med school, how did I do succeed in med school? Kind of more of the same. I mean, I don't know that I have a secret recipe.
How has COVID-19 impacted you as a physician now, and how have you adapted to the change?
Okay, so that COVID-19 has really impacted all of us in healthcare, obviously. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say, on multiple different levels, but starting with like the mundane from just everyday activities. Some of the stuff you see on TV is absolutely true. How early on in this pandemic, I'd come home and I had to strip down in the garage, take my clothes off down to my underwear in the garage every day before coming in the house, because we really. So my wife is a physician also, and we were very concerned about. Early on, no one really knew how contagious this was as far as contact
Right.
precautions. Meaning that can you touch someone's clothes and spread it? And now we know that it's extremely unlikely to spread it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't know that. We didn't know that a year and a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Even a year ago, yeah. So up until just the last couple of months, I was still getting undressed in my garage every day. And every day I came home, I showered in the morning and I showered in the evening. And my clothes would stay in a garbage bag in the garage until they needed to be washed, and they would go to a separate load. My shoes would stay in the garage permanently. I wouldn't touch my kids when I came into the house until after I'd showered.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that kind of thing changed obviously. Then at work, there were a lot of things that changed. So you probably heard some of this from other doctors and or nurses that when we went to the hospital every day, we were getting screened. So you had to get a temperature screen. You had to go through a checkpoint where they asked you if you had any sick contacts, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So that changed. Then masking, obviously, we were wearing masks all over the place, even outside the hospital. But inside the hospital, essentially, if I saw a patient, I would wear an N95 for the first, I'd say, 9 months of the pandemic. I'd wear an N95 as much as possible, and if the patient was what we call the PUI, person under investigation, or a known COVID patient, then we had to wear a full on face shield, cover head to toe, N95, eye protection. And that type of thing it's kind of taxing, gets tiring after a while.
Right. Yeah.
Now I'll say that at least I got to take the stuff off between cases. If I did a procedure, I'd come back to our reading room or reading scans. We didn't have to keep it on, all day.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like my wife in the ER, I mean, they kept their masks on, N95s on the whole shift. So for 12 hours, they would keep their masks on, which I haven't kept a mask. The longest I kept an N95 mask on. I don't know if you've tried wearing one, but they're not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I wore one on a flight when I flew up to Maryland to see my parents because I hadn't seen them in a long time. And so I got on a plane last September and wore an N95 for about total transit time, I'd say, from door to door was maybe like 6 hours, 7 hours.
Right.
And it was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I consider myself lucky that I wasn't working in an ER where we just had to wear those all day.
All right, this is my last question for you today. What advice can you give students who would like to pursue a medical career?
So, if I were going to advise someone in your shoes, I think I would say a couple things. So I'll start with things that I think you have to. It's kind of accepted that okay, you have to do well on with your GPA. You have to do well in school. You have to do well on your standardized tests. But that's only a starting point. I mean, you really have to kind of try to separate yourself beyond grades and test scores. And the way you do that is by you don't. These things don't make you. It doesn't require a genius to do a lot of these things. But being creative and coming up with some kind of project you do for a summer, where you start a business. I mean, it doesn't have to be something that costs a lot of money. Start or some charitable process or organization. Just start something small. It doesn't need to be really ambitious, but things like that are unique really kind of jump off the page. And when I don't interview college students or anything or medical students at this point, but some of my colleagues and friends do interview high school students for, including my sister. She also interviews high school students that are applying to college. And, what I hear from them is they say, wow, it's amazing. Like all these students are just such good students. I'd have a difficult time differentiating between, what makes one better than the other. And really what makes one better than the other is it's not that one has, 50 points higher than the other one on their SATs. It's more that, for instance, my sister said that she interviewed, so my sister went to Georgetown for undergraduate. And she said that one of the students she interviewed had created some online, and she's not, it doesn't sound like she's a computer guru, but she created some online site to teach. Her parents are from somewhere in Eastern Europe, and she was teaching music classes online, teaching them to play the piano, these elementary school kids online that are in some poor Eastern European town. And she did that for the summer. And so she talked about that project with my sister, and my sister was kind of blown away. She was just really impressed with that. So those types of things really, make you jump off the page.
Got you. Thank you so much for your time today. I don't want to get your name wrong. Dr. Ranjithan?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
okay.
Everybody here is just, I have a long last name, so a lot of people just call me Dr. R.
Dr. R. Okay, thank you so much for your time today out of your schedule. Yeah. I know it's very busy. And today.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure. Good luck with all your pursuits and the rest of your project, okay?
Thank you. Have a great rest of your night.
All right, thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.